This is AVSocial episode 52, where we talk marketing strategy versus tactics and how you can move from being a reactive marketing organization to a proactive marketing engine.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
AVSocial episode 52, Throwing Spaghetti.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Atlas IED, innovative audio solutions for every business environment.
Welcome back to another episode of AVSocial. Today we'll be talking about marketing strategy. With so many tools and techniques at your disposal, how do you tell what in your marketing plan is working and what isn't? On today's AVSocial, we'll talk about A/B testing, where to start measuring, and where AdWords fits into your overall marketing plan. I'm your host today, Kelly Perkins. Our co-host, Dawn Mead, is having some computer issues today, so you're just stuck with me and our wonderful guests. Today we have Karen Kleindl, a fractional marketing leader and consultant. Say hi, Karen.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
And we have Jane Johnson, an AVSocial veteran, owner and CEO of Pivot Communications.
Hello.
So today we're talking about marketing strategy versus tactics a little bit, because I think sometimes as marketers in AV and marketers in general, we tend to kind of jump to the latest and greatest kind of marketing trend or buzzword. You know, there's social media, there's events, there's trade shows, there's collateral, there's all these different things that we use, within our marketing plan. But sometimes we don't necessarily step back and look at the overall objectives and marketing goals for the organization. So I thought today we could spend a little bit of time with these two who are, again, veterans in marketing strategy and helping customers in the audiovisual realm for several years. Kind of talk a little bit about their experience and some ideas and tips and tricks on creating a really good marketing strategy. So, Jane, let's start with you. How about, why is it important to have an overall marketing strategy versus just following tactics?
Well, I think it's kind of like throwing spaghetti at the ceiling to see if it sticks. You're just kind of taking a shot in the dark. If you want to waste a lot of money and time, then by all means just launch into the tactics and chase the shiny object. But if you want to make sure that you're on point and you're going to meet your objectives, the objectives that are set by your company, you're going to be the most efficient and effective, and you're going to work within your budget, you really have to have a strategy. And it's a tough thing because it goes back to your intro, like people know what the tactics are. It's really easy to relate to. We know what Instagram is. We know what all these what I call the shiny objects are. But when you talk about strategy, that's a lot harder for people to visualize. What is a strategy? What does it look like? How do I get somebody excited about strategy? Especially if it starts to involve research. I think that's probably why people don't do it. It's hard to get them excited about it.
Yeah.
Right. And Karen, maybe you could help us define the difference a little bit between strategy and maybe just kind of reiterate what Jane said about why it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really critical. And for any marketing team or marketing leader to be successful, it really does begin with what is that business plan and what are the business goals. If those aren't defined or written down, really the conversation needs to start there, because the only way for marketing to truly impact business is for it to be aligned with those business goals. That's our job, is to allow the organization to reach those goals. So that marketing strategy really becomes the blueprint that guides then the tactics that we should choose. So the tactics, operationalize that strategy and that vision that ultimately should drive towards achieving the business goals. And what's interesting is that I think a lot of organizations start marketing in a very tactical fashion, right? So we typically are led by a founder or leader, right? That's who has the vision, that team of some sort that's executing that vision initially. And then they realize, well, we're probably going to be at a trade show, right? We probably need some collateral. So marketing has exercised their muscle in that way only within an organization. And I think what's interesting right now is that that's allowed organizations, that type of fairly successful. But what has changed is a whole lot. The buyer is in control. So now people are realizing, organizations are realizing, oh, why isn't that collateral working? Why isn't our sales team quite as successful as we used to be when we deploy plans like that? And the reason is because that buyer is in control. So this whole idea of marketing strategy and connecting it to the business plan and directing your tactics is probably more critical than ever before. And I do believe that the organizations that are going to be successful are those that are going to take a pause and a breath and say, okay, I really need to understand what this marketing thing is beyond a tactic of supporting a trade show event or a collateral piece, and really realize that it's going to become the engine of my organization.
Yeah, I would say, most of the companies that we work with, it is more of that reactionary marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the way they've always done it. And you're right, it has served them well.
Yeah.
But that does indicate that there's a great opportunity for companies to start to shift.
Yep.
They can, by implementing strategies, in a way give themselves a competitive advantage, because a lot of companies are still in that reactionary mode.
Yep. And I think that reactionary mode can be okay, but it's not sustainable, right? We know that we can see success with tactics and maybe secure some leads, maybe have some positive impact on the business, but it's very, very short-lived. And the challenge is that, really building a marketing engine for your organization is the reality of the future. It really is. But to do that takes time. And so, lots of times I see lots of things about marketing delivering ROI. Well, sure, you can deliver ROI, but I will tell you the only way that you can get to an ROI for marketing is if your sales and marketing are aligned, that buyer journey is well defined, those KPIs and goals are well defined, so that you can truly talk about how all that comes together. And it really needs to become a cohesive approach that sales and marketing and leadership are all on board with. And I think it makes the job of a marketer really hard, because I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen to help organizations really understand what marketing is. It isn't a piece of collateral. It isn't a touchy-feely thing. It's a real thing that expresses who your organization is, and really is going to be critical for your success.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen a shift in the AV industry where marketers are starting to get more and more informed. Mm-hmm. And that is the position they're in, is trying to educate the rest of their company and be that evangelist for the marketing organization, trying to get buy-in from other stakeholders so they can start to create more of that strategy. But again, it goes back to, how do they describe it so it doesn't just seem like it's a sinkhole for money and time and resources, and to describe it in a way that everyone else can get on board and say, oh, I understand. Because if you say things like, marketing engine, that makes sense to everyone that's in marketing. It is a little bit harder to get everyone else on board in the company. So that, again, it's like, we're going to get a strategy deck out of this.
Well, it's a real struggle. I mean, I've struggled with it in many organizations. So, that being said, how would you guys advise those audiovisual companies that historically haven't had a marketing engine or really a strategic marketing plan? How would you recommend going from that kind of reactionary, collateral trade show, marketing tactical methodology to a strategic marketing plan? Where would you start? What do you do? What do I tell these people?
We work with really pretty small clients. I don't know what type of clients you work with, Karen. And so from our perspective, it has to be fairly incremental progress. Mm-hmm. You can't just allocate a $100,000 budget to go do a big strategy exercise. Yeah. It just can't be done.
Yeah.
What we like to do, just at a minimum, we would like to have a conversation where we get, the executive leadership in and really understand what are some of the goals driving the business. Mm-hmm. What are those revenue goals? And if they've got revenue goals, like, it's helpful to understand what's driving that. Yeah. Are they progressing towards it? Where do they feel like they have opportunity? Doing basically your SWOT analysis but more in an informal way, because they're not going to take time and like they're just not going to do it. You can't draw it out. It's having that conversation, and then from there we usually try to narrow it down. Okay, then what's that specific business area or solution set that you feel like we can focus on? Because we can't do everything. They don't have the budget to it, so we start to try to narrow down. Okay, where can we focus?
Yeah.
I heard a great quote last week. Sorry to interrupt, Karen.
Oh.
It was like, we can't do everything, but we can't do nothing.
Mhm. Yes.
True.
You know, so even like you said, taking it one bite at a time, you know, not throwing the entire sandwich at them, but, you know, just a bite of a sandwich, you know, at a
What's
time.
that quote about eating an elephant? Like just one bite at a time?
Yeah. I totally agree, Jane. It is really incremental. And I think that it is important. You know, Kelly and I actually ironically sat in a meeting last week where it was like, well, all of our customers are different and all of them are important. And I think that lots of times I find myself, and it's probably true for all of us, in a conversation for good reason, where there's a lot of information, right? There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of places where you can go. But the only way an organization, frankly, a sales team, a marketing team can be effective is if you are disciplined enough to focus. And to your point, Jane, it's figuring out where's the greatest opportunity, what's reflective of where you can grow revenue, but also reflects who you are as an organization and where you want to go in the future. So starting there and starting to show success in that area and surrounding it in the right way. I think what's interesting about it is as you build it, you know, there's some important things that have to be considered as, you know, resources, you know, not just dollars, but people and technology, right? Those are really important pieces. And I think that's what's getting harder about, even more challenging about marketing is, one, people don't really understand it, but people also don't understand how complex it's becoming. And the key is for us to keep it simple with them, but that, you know, you sort of need technology, and you can't do it all at once, but you're going to need technology to be a key piece of this so that you can measure it, so you can optimize it, so you can learn and build over time. And, you know, I consider myself a T-shaped marketer. I can see the whole landscape. I understand things at a broad level and can go slightly deep in some of them, but I know exactly what is needed depending on what the client is trying to accomplish. And in many cases, because lots of the channels, whether it's a technology channel or social media or whatever content or whatever it is, you might need to engage experts. You need experts. You go to a general practice doctor, but you're not going to let him deliver chemotherapy to you. Like, you really do need to go to an expert when it comes to this stuff, or develop your skills as a marketing team to do it. So how do you get the organization to hone in to what you were saying, Jane, on something specific, and then make sure that you're managing the success of that in a really smart way? Because it will take resources, both people and money, to make sure that you can say back to that leadership team, here's what we've delivered. And those metrics right away may not be impressive, because if you don't have the system built to measure it in an effective way and to deliver it, and to say, hey, marketing generated this many leads, if that's what it is, how did the sales team do? If that conversation isn't cohesive and continued, then marketing can't be successful, because we're not closing the loop with the team that's able to answer those questions.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it too is, and you're absolutely right about the investment in marketing technology, and how it's a big chunk of it's starting to become a bigger and bigger chunk of the budget. But it's often those expectations, because out of the gate, like I've never seen a marketing campaign just perform perfectly out of the gate. That's just not how marketing works. We're meant to use our experience and the research and, you know, our strategy to launch the best possible plan, but it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And we go into continuous, you know, improvement and optimization from what we're seeing with the data. But I think sometimes clients, and that's part of that education process we have to do with them, is that there is this heavy expectation on marketers. Well, if I'm going to spend this much money, well, it better be perfect as soon as you launch it. And it's just not a realistic expectation.
It's not. And I think it's interesting because lots of times there isn't the same expectation on engineers or new product development, right? That is a very expensive proposition, a very expensive process. And it's never right from the get-go. That is a process of fine-tuning and refinement to make sure that we're putting the right service, the right product in the market. And that, frankly, is no different than what it is for marketing. It is, you know, we're making educated guesses based on our experience, what we see in the marketplace. That is what it is, an educated guess. There is no proven right or wrong way to do it. There are better ways and less better ways, I guess. But at the end of the day, it is about putting it in the market to say what's happening. And part of the problem is, I think, and frankly, you know, I see a lot of the smaller to mid-sized organizations in the AV space as well, is that two things. One, understanding your audience. Understanding your audience is the most critical thing you need to do. And people want to say, oh, we know them, let's move on. You don't know them like we need to know them from a marketing standpoint. And that is absolutely critical. And if you think you have the information, we need to go deeper. There's more than likely the chance we need to go deeper. And if we have to talk to customers, if we have to do research, it is absolutely necessary, because if you go in the wrong assumptions about your target audience, you could be wasting money. So that is critically important. And so I think it really starts there. And I lost my second point. It'll come back to me, but that was my
that first point was like such a good point. It's like one of the biggest points out there, because, you know, in 15 years that I've been working with Pivot, I probably could tell you, because I can count them on one hand, the times that I've gone in and met with a prospective client or a client and asked them, who is your target customer? Yep. And they've actually been able to give me an answer that I felt like you really know who it is you're selling to.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have that,
yep,
how are you successful?
Yep, it's key.
Well, and I would kind of, you know, to springboard off that too is, you know, for integration firms, I mean, they have so many customers,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, their customers realistically could be any commercial space, or if you're in residential, any home, you know what I mean? So it's like finding that focus and that discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and really honing in
because
on
that first part is usually the answer you get. Well, it could be anybody.
Yep,
right.
Exactly.
Well, we can't market to anybody.
It can't be anyone. It can't
right.
be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I remembered my second point, because it's related to the customer, if you don't mind. That I think one of the things that I see a lot, and Jane, I'd be very curious of your perspective on this, is that organizations have to realize it's not about them. It's not their language. It's not how their business operates. It's not how their business is organized. And it gets back to our conversation about the customer. How does the customer talk about it? What are the customer pain points? How do they want you to deliver products to service to them? Because I think right now this space is in a really interesting juncture of when are they going to decide to really understand that customer and really build sales and marketing around that customer versus around the organization. And I think many of them, I'm seeing a few that are evolving towards that. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot of opportunity still in this space to talk about your service offering and to talk about your solutions that surround the customer versus reflective of the business structure of an integrator of a manufacturer.
Yeah, it goes back to one of your first points, that what they have been doing has been working well enough to a point.
Yep.
And so that it's all about them, you know, the way they have been marketing in a reactionary mode. It's just so ingrained, I think, even in their culture, mm-hmm. that it's really hard to start getting that shift. We are starting to see it, mm-hmm. but there is still a lot of that deeply, deeply entrenched in these companies. And I think it leads to a lot of frustration, mm-hmm. because there is this recognition that, you know, we're starting to fall behind, mm-hmm. or we're not getting the results that we want. We're very frustrated because what has always worked for us isn't working anymore.
Yep.
Now what do we do?
Yep.
And you know, this transition into, you know, a different way to market and even a different way to sell, going back to your point about, you know, the buyer journey and how the buyer is so much more sophisticated now. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy transition.
No.
And it's going to take some time, and it's sometimes a little bit painful for these folks.
Totally. And I think the organizations that begin to do that will come out the winners. And that's the state of, I think, the space right now, is that those that start to embrace that and make the investment and embark on that journey, because it will be a long one, it will be transitional, mm-hmm. but they will begin to win. And I think they'll see better response and a more positive impact on their business.
But it's trusting the process and saying, you know what, maybe I don't know everything about my customers. Maybe it's worth taking a look and saying, you know what, who are our customers? Who actually are the people in the room? Who do we want in the room? Who's making the decisions? Yep. Are we missing some opportunities? Yep. And really being willing to take a second look at their business.
Yeah, I think you're right. Trust in the system. And, you know, the challenge is, and to the fault of marketing in some cases. It's not like we're in the financial system, an accounting person where you've got a balance sheet and income statement, right? Like the fundamentals of marketing and what you need to do are the same, but the groups that you engage with deliver a different product, right? So it's really hard to compare one group to the next, and they're not all created equally. And there are marketing groups out there that don't deliver a quality product. And so I think that trust can be hard because but in the past, I'm sure where organizations have been kind of burned or hurt by that. And so they're hesitant. I hope that marketing can gain a reputation back or build that reputation up, because it really will be important for them in the future, and finding that right partner is really critical.
Yeah, true.
So let's jump back a little bit, and we had talked about metrics a bit, but how important are metrics when you're creating a marketing strategy? We talk about ROI, we talk about all of these technologies that are available to help us read the data, but how important are metrics?
Really
it's
important.
critical.
Yeah.
How do you know if it's working?
Yeah. And I think that there are different levels. Oh, sorry, Jane, go ahead if you want.
Well, first you got to decide what you're going to measure, and what you're going to measure really depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. So it goes back into the strategy. Are you trying to change or shift perception of your position in the marketplace? Are you trying to drive sales? You're going to measure very different things depending on what your objective is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, Kelly, you and I have kind of been dancing around this one with a client that we're working with right now, right? And it's like, I think sometimes when people say, metrics and KPIs, they think they have to be super sophisticated, right? Like, and you can only really get what's the lifetime value of your customer. Just take baby steps, right? Like we've just rolled out sort of a new brand story that we think is going to be more compelling to our audience and hopefully attract more people, then you know what? They might be softer metrics. They might be, hey, did that increase traffic to our website? What kind of reaction are salespeople getting in the field? I mean, you've got to put some things in place, but you have to define it, and then
some sort of benchmark.
Yeah, yeah. So to Jane's point, it is dependent on, well, what are you trying to accomplish? How does it go back to the strategy and the plan and the business goals? But define some kind of metrics, because I think it's easy to make it really hard and easy to not do it. But just put a few out there and start seeing how it's going and measure it, and they'll just get more sophisticated over time.
But it can start very simple.
Yeah,
you don't have to get crazy and spend $100,000 on a measuring
dashboard. Yeah,
right. You can just say, okay, we're getting more calls, we're getting more inquiries this week than 2 months ago or something. But starting somewhere, putting that kind of foundation and that benchmark in place. So I want to jump into a little bit, kind of getting to some of the tactics, because we did talk a lot about marketing strategy and the importance of it. And I think we can all agree it's very important. But, we talked a little bit about trade shows as tactics. But, as the buying journey has kind of changed over the last, 10, 20 years, the internet kind of came into place, and all, now that we actually have the ability to go out and research on our own and becoming those sophisticated buyers, what are some of the tactics that you guys are seeing that are really, really helpful that maybe some of our listeners could look into?
Of course, we're going to hesitate to recommend any tactics outside of a strategy.
Fair enough. But you hear all these buzzwords, you hear inbound marketing, you hear Google AdWords, you hear Facebook, it's ads, and you kind of A/B testing and all of these jargony words that I think frighten people off. They scare me sometimes. So.
Well, it is interesting that HubSpot, HubSpot, when they initially start talking about inbound marketing, they pretty much rejected paid as the tactic for inbound, but they have in recent years, probably the last couple of years, embraced paid social and paid advertising like Google pay-per-click. And that's really, I think, helped change the conversation around whether you should be investing in paid social and Google AdWords. And they're both tactics that can be successful, but it really does tie back to your strategy. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Who are you going after? And you can't, with Google AdWords, I have kind of mixed feelings about Google AdWords because I have seen people waste a lot of money on it and not get a lot of return because it is not an easy tactic to implement, particularly if you're doing search, because you really have to be committed to the process. You've got to do a lot of keyword research, and you've got to be constantly monitoring and refining your keywords. And you've got to have a lot of negative keywords. It takes a lot of effort, and you've got to commit to that process fully. And I haven't seen a lot of people do that, particularly when they're trying to manage it on their own. We actually work with another partner to execute that because there's some good resources out there that can help you execute it, because it is a difficult tactic. But done properly, it can be effective. The other really big challenge that I see is that they'll launch a pay-per-click campaign and just shoot people over to their homepage with no thought to what path they want them to take or how they want them to convert. And then you've just spent, clicks can cost you $1 to $10, just depending. And you have spent a tremendous amount of money sending people to your homepage with no thought as to what you want them to do next. And so was that successful? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that I've kind of looked at, to answer your question, Kelly, in two ways in terms of tactics, because I think there is a little bit of science and a little bit of theory to how to approach marketing these days. And, I think there's kind of three key things that as you think about tactics, that before you jump to anything, that have to be in place. And I really do believe there has to be a strong narrative that talks about how you're different, whether it's at the brand level or product level or service level. Like, we've got to have a story to tell. What is that story? Secondly, those audiences, who are the audience you're talking about? And then thirdly, what does that journey look like? Because here's what happens is that once you understand those things, then your foundation, your website is the hub. And if your story is not reflected at the hub, if your audience cannot see themselves at your website and it doesn't answer the questions that they have, then you've fallen short. And if it doesn't take them most of the way through that journey, obviously there's other tactics that supplement it, but I think that you've got to understand those three fundamental things, and then you've got to make sure that the foundation of your marketing, which is your website, your social channels, and your content plan, is where you start. I personally, if a client wants to start spending money because they need leads, you know what? If you need leads today, you've called us way too late, because if your buying cycle is 2 years, then I can't tell you that you're going to have revenue tomorrow because your buying cycle is too long. Like, I can fill the top of the funnel, but you're not going to have any impact until way late. So if you've called me and you need leads tomorrow, we can try to get you leads, but it isn't going to close the revenue gap that you might be facing today. So we can do that. We can fill a short-term problem that you have, and we can solve that. But at the end of the day, that's a short-term fix. We've been talking about this, a short-term fix. We can do it, but we're trying to build you a long-term engine, something that runs efficiently over time. So get your foundation in place with content, website, your social channels. Then let's start talking about the campaigns or the programs that we're going to put in place and what we're trying to accomplish and what the proper tactics are to get to accomplish those goals. And so I think that, that's the order that I would start in with the client. And that those tactics, I do believe that the most effective campaigns are a mix of paid, owned, and earned. But in most cases, Jane and I, we're working both with small to mid-sized organizations. You're probably starting with that owned and earned. And that's why SEO and keyword research and really good content are critical. If you're not doing that well, then your business isn't on every day. Because we know whether you're buying a car or a t-shirt or a pair of shoes or a computer or an audio video visual integration system, you're going to Google search. And I don't know what you're putting in, but we better know what you're putting in, and we better know what kind of content information that we need to be providing to you so that you find us, because that's how they're finding you. And so that's the order that I would go in. And really, that's also where I feel like, the way that I'm working right now is that I've got a whole network of experts, because when I meet a client and I better understand what their problem is, I want to tap into the exact right people at the exact right budget that absolutely can fit that exact need, because every client is different. Generally, your tactics are going to be the same, but they are different from a budgetary standpoint. They're different from a service standpoint. They're different from an agility standpoint. And so really wanting to build custom marketing teams around clients. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think, I think that's kind of a good summary of what we've talked about today. It's instead of, like Jane said, going in and spending $10,000, with Google AdWords, or, spending $5,000 on Facebook ads or boosting posts or whatever that may be, it's important to have a marketing strategy. So you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall, that you're not just wasting money, and that every single dollar you have in your organization is getting spent, intelligently and smartly, and that there's, education behind it and research.
And your brand is always on today. And so if your brand or your organization is on in the wrong way, and you haven't done your research and you don't understand your strategy and you're communicating the wrong messages, then unfortunately you're on in a wrong way, and in a bad way that it could hinder your business.
Right. So, well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you coming on the show today. And let's close this up with Jane. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. You can sometimes find me on Twitter when I have time at Jane_pivot. And you can find me on email much more easily. Send me an email at jane.johnson@pivotslc.com, SLC like Salt Lake City. That's where I am.
Awesome. And Karen, where can people find you?
Obviously LinkedIn, send me a message, link in with me there. Karen Kleindl. You can find me there. KLEINDL, because that last name can be kind of tricky. You can also send me an email. I'm actually in an interesting point in terms of setting up an offering. I've spent the last couple of years really auditing the market and trying to figure out what this looks like, and this conversation fits nicely into that. You can email me at karen.kleindl@bemighty.com, and that's BEMITEY.com. So you can reach me at that email address.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You can find me
that URL.
Yeah, thanks.
You can find me, Kelly Perkins, at Kelly P. Perkins on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I am a very large advocate of the Ignite initiative. I work with NSCA to get young people in industry. Woo! And I do some marketing consulting as well with folks in the industry, because I miss marketing a ton, and it's fun, and I get to work with cool people like Jane and Karen. But yeah, thanks for the episode today, and I hope everyone has a great day.